The silver ships came on a Tuesday morning. They hung in Earth's sky like massive stars, so bright that people around the world stopped what they were doing and looked up. For 3 days, the ships just waited. Then they sent a message. They wanted to talk. Ambassador Yuna stood in the United Nations building, staring at the alien beings on the screen. They called themselves the Galactic Council. There were representatives from 15 different species, each one stranger than the last. Some looked like walking crystals. Others were clouds of gas held together by force fields. But they all spoke with one voice through their translators. They wanted peace. They wanted to welcome humanity into the greater galaxy. Yuna felt hope rise in her chest. Earth was dying. The oceans were rising. Wars over water and food killed thousands every month. Diseases spread faster than doctors could treat them. Maybe these aliens could help. Maybe they had answers. General Kiwon did not share her hope. He sat in the military command center, watching the same transmission with cold eyes. He had fought in 3 wars. He knew what pretty words looked like when they hid ugly truths. Something about the aliens made his instincts scream danger. But nobody was listening to a general when ambassadors were talking. Dr. Hyan agreed with the general. She was a scientist who studied human behavior and psychology. When she read the treaty the council offered, she found problems. The language was confusing on purpose. There were clauses hidden in sections that seemed boring. One section talked about cultural preservation. It said humanity must send 10,000 children to council facilities. The council said it was for education. They said the children would learn about the galaxy and come home as ambassadors. Hyan tried to warn everyone. She stood before world leaders and explained that this was wrong. No advanced civilization needed children for education. No peaceful society took kids away from their families. But the leaders did not listen. They were desperate. The council promised technology to clean the oceans. They promised medicine to cure diseases. They promised food production systems that could feed billions. All they wanted in return was the treaty. All they wanted was the children. The decision was made in a closed room by people who would never have to give up their own kids. They would select 10,000 children by lottery from every nation on Earth, ages 5 to 12. The children would go to the stars for 10 years and then return home as the bridge between humanity and the galaxy. Gina held her son Minho's hand as they stood in the processing center. He was 8 years old, small for his age, with curious eyes that asked 1,000 questions. Her daughter Sora stood on her other side. Sora was only 6. Both of their numbers had been called in the lottery. Gina had cried for 3 days. Then she stopped crying and started memorizing every detail of her children's faces. Minho tried to be brave. He had heard his mother crying at night. He knew she did not want him to go. But the officials said it was an honor. They said he would see stars and planets. They said he would learn amazing things. Part of him was scared. Part of him was excited. He held his little sister's hand and promised her he would take care of her. Sora did not understand. She just knew her mother was sad. She knew strangers were going to take her somewhere. She cried and held on to Gina's leg. The officials were patient at first. Then they became firm. Then they simply removed the child from her mother's arms. The processing center held 500 children. They were divided into groups and loaded onto shuttles. Each shuttle would take them to one of the massive ships waiting in orbit. Minho was put in one group. Sora was put in another. They were separated. Minho screamed and tried to run to his sister. Guards held him back. He watched Sora's shuttle leave before his did. That was the last time he saw her for 1,800 years. Gina watched from behind a fence with thousands of other parents. She watched the shuttles rise into the sky. She watched them disappear into the silver ships. The ships hung in the sky for one more day. Then they vanished. Just like that, they were gone. 10,000 children gone with them. For the first month, everything seemed fine. The council sent video feeds showing the children. They looked happy. They were in bright rooms with other kids. They were learning and playing. They smiled at the cameras. The council sent messages saying the children were adjusting well. They said direct communication would come soon, but the messages became less frequent. The video showed the same scenes over and over. When parents asked questions, they received automated responses. When diplomats demanded answers, the council representatives became cold. They said the children were thriving. They said direct contact would interfere with the education process. They said humanity needed to trust the process. Gina did not trust the process. She was a researcher, trained to analyze data. She started watching the videos frame by frame. She found something wrong. The timestamps did not match. A video supposedly from Monday showed the same lighting as a video from Thursday. She saw the same child in 2 different locations at the exact same time. The videos were fake. They were edited. They were lies. She took her findings to General Kiwan. He was no longer active military, but he still had contacts. He gathered people who thought like him. People who did not trust the council. People who wanted answers. Hyan joined them. So did Yuna, who now realized her hope had blinded her to the truth. They tried to contact the council directly. They demanded proof that the children were safe. They demanded real communication. The council refused. Finally, the council sent one last message. It was short and clear. The children were council property now. They were part of a cultural preservation program approved by treaty. Humanity had agreed to the terms. The matter was closed. That was when humanity understood what had happened. They had been tricked. Their children had been stolen. And the beings who took them were so powerful, so advanced, that Earth could do nothing about it. Gina stood in her empty house that night. Minho's toys were still scattered on the floor. Sora's drawings hung on the walls. She made a decision. She would not accept this. She would not stop looking. If it took her entire life, she would find her children. And if she died before finding them, someone else would continue. Humanity would not forget. Humanity would not give up. She began making calls. She began organizing. She began building what would become the Eternal Vigil. The search had started. It would last 2,000 years. The betrayal changed humanity forever. Every nation that had been at war stopped fighting. Every border dispute was put aside. Every political difference was forgotten. There was only one goal now. Find the children. Bring them home. General Kiwan came out of retirement. He was 70 years old, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He gathered every military leader from every country. They met in a bunker deep underground. For 2 weeks, they planned. When they emerged, they announced the formation of the United Human Fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier would serve one purpose. They would find the council. They would get the children back. But the galaxy was huge beyond imagination. The council controlled thousands of star systems. Their territory stretched across distances that light took years to cross. Humanity had barely learned to reach their own moon. They had small ships that could reach Mars. They had nothing that could challenge the council. Taiho was Kiwan's grandson. He grew up hearing stories about the day the children were taken. He studied every subject he could: engineering, physics, military strategy. By the time he was 30, he was the youngest admiral in the fleet. By the time he was 50, he commanded half of humanity's warships. He spent his entire life building ships and training crews. He died at 90 without ever seeing a council world. But he laid the foundation for those who would come after. Gina kept her promise. She created the Eternal Vigil. It started with just 12 people meeting in her living room. Parents who had lost children, scientists who wanted answers, soldiers who wanted revenge. They pooled their money. They shared information. They never stopped looking. Gina worked until her body gave out. She was 94 when she died. On her deathbed, she held the hand of a young woman named Dio. Dio was an engineer, brilliant and determined. Gina made her promise to continue the work. Dio promised. She kept that promise for 60 years. Before she died, she passed the leadership to someone else. That person passed it to another. The Eternal Vigil became an organization that spanned generations. Grandchildren of the original families swore the same oath their grandparents had sworn. We will find them. We will bring them home. For 250 years, humanity searched. They built better ships. They explored nearby star systems. They found empty planets and strange phenomena. But they found no trace of the Council or the children. Then Captain Sang-hoon made a discovery. He was exploring a dead world on the edge of known space. Sensors detected artificial structures underground. His team dug through rock and ice. They found a facility. It was old, abandoned for decades. But it had been a council building. The symbols matched. The technology matched. Inside, they found data cores. Most were destroyed or corrupted, but some still worked. Sang-hoon's team spent months extracting information. What they found made them sick. The facility had been a research station. The files talked about human subjects, test subjects, children. They talked about experiments, cognitive testing, psychological manipulation, forced adaptation trials. There were statistics about survival rates. The numbers were horrible. Less than 40% of subjects survived the first year. Sang-hoon brought the data back to Earth. The leaders read it in silence. The parents who were still alive wept. The Eternal Vigil analyzed every piece of information. The truth became clear. The council had not taken the children to educate them. They had taken them to study them, to experiment on them, to use them. Humanity's grief turned to rage. But rage without power was useless. The council knew humanity was angry. They responded by building barriers. At 300 years after the taking, the council implemented what they called the Great Barrier. It was a network of military checkpoints and energy fields. They surrounded human space completely. No human ship could get through. Humanity was trapped in their own corner of the galaxy. For 3 centuries, humans beat themselves against those barriers. Ships were destroyed. Crews were killed. Nothing worked. The Council's technology was too advanced. Their weapons were too powerful. Humanity could not break through. But humanity did not waste those 300 years. They studied. They learned. They built. Every piece of Council technology they found was taken apart and analyzed. Every failed attack taught them something new. Scientists worked their entire lives on single problems. Engineers died at their workbenches, still trying to solve equations. 600 years after the taking, a woman named Yoonji had a breakthrough. She was the great-granddaughter of Dr. Hyan. She had her ancestors' notes, preserved carefully through the centuries. She had spent 40 years studying Council propulsion systems. She understood something others had missed. The Council ships moved through normal space. They bent space around them, but they still moved through it. That was why their barriers worked. They controlled the space. What if humanity did not move through space at all? What if they moved around it? Through it? Outside it? The theory was radical. Most scientists said it was impossible. But Yoonji had data from the Council facility. She had equations that suggested it might work. She built a small prototype. It exploded. She built another. It also exploded. She built 17 more. On the 18th attempt, the prototype disappeared. It reappeared 3 seconds later, exactly 100 kilometers away. It had not traveled through the space between. It had simply stopped being in one place and started being in another. Unji called it the phase drive. It took another 50 years to build one large enough for a ship. It took another 20 years to train pilots who could use it without dying. But finally, 800 years after the children were taken, humanity had a way past the barriers. Commander Yejun led the first mission. His ship was small and fast. It carried no weapons, only sensors. He activated the phase drive at the edge of the Great Barrier. The universe twisted around him. Colors that had no names filled his vision. Time felt wrong, too fast and too slow at once. Then it was over. His ship was on the other side of the barrier. He was in Council Space Dot for 2 weeks. Yejun's ship moved through Council territory, scanning everything. He found trade routes and military stations. He found civilian worlds and industrial centers. And he found something else. Hidden behind layers of security and false signals, he found 17 worlds that did not appear on any Council map. 17 worlds that were heavily guarded. 17 worlds that matched energy signatures from the ancient research facility. Yejun transmitted his findings back to Earth using the phase drive's quantum link. Then he tried to get closer to one of the hidden worlds. Council ships detected him. They pursued. Yejun's ship was fast, but the Council ships were faster. They caught him at the edge of a star system. They destroyed his ship with weapons that turned matter into energy. But Yejun had succeeded. He had found the sanctuaries. He had found where the Council was keeping the children. After 800 years of searching, humanity finally knew where to look. The news spread across Earth and all human colonies. People who had been born centuries after the taking heard the story for the first time. They learned about the children. They learned about the search. They learned about Yejun's sacrifice. And they understood. This was not just about those 10,000 children anymore. This was about what humanity was. This was about never forgetting, never giving up, never abandoning their own. The Eternal Vigil received more volunteers in 1 month than in the previous century. The United Human Fleet doubled in size within a year. Scientists worked on improving the phase drive. Soldiers trained for missions they might not survive. Families who had no connection to the original children donated money and time. Humanity prepared for the next phase. They knew where the children were. Now they had to figure out how to get them back. The scout ships went in first. They were small and quiet, designed to observe without being seen. They used the phase drive to appear near the hidden worlds and then drifted on momentum, powered down to almost nothing. For months, they watched and recorded everything. What they saw broke their hearts. The 17 worlds were covered in massive complexes. From orbit, they looked like cities. But they were not cities. They were facilities. Research facilities. Each one was surrounded by energy shields and guard towers. Sensors covered every approach. Council warships patrolled constantly. The scouts sent back images. Buildings with no windows. Compounds divided by high walls. Armed guards everywhere. These were not schools. These were not sanctuaries. These were prisons. Lieutenant Nari commanded one of the scout ships. She was a specialist in intelligence gathering. Her ship spent 6 months watching one facility from the edge of the system. She used every sensor she had. She intercepted communications. She mapped guard patterns. She analyzed energy usage. And slowly, she built a picture of what was happening inside. The data was horrifying. The facilities ran on schedules measured in experiments, not days. There were sections for cognitive testing, where subjects were given problems to solve under stress. There were areas for physical adaptation, where bodies were pushed beyond normal limits. There were isolation chambers. There were sections marked only as disposal. But there was something else too. Life signs. Thousands of them. Not just children anymore. Adults. The children had grown up. Some of them had been inside these facilities for 800 years. The first landing team went down under cover of a storm. 6 soldiers in stealth suits moving through rain and darkness. They breached a perimeter wall and made it inside a compound. What they found made strong soldiers cry. The buildings were cold and gray. The halls were narrow and lit by harsh lights. Rooms barely large enough for a person held 2 or 3. The people inside were human, but they looked wrong. Some had been modified, their bodies changed by experiments. Others looked haunted, their eyes empty. They wore identical gray clothes. They moved slowly, like they had forgotten how to hurry. The soldiers tried to talk to them. Most did not respond. They stared without seeing. But one old man turned his head. He looked at the soldiers with eyes that suddenly became aware. He spoke in a language that was almost human, mixed with words from other tongues. His name had been Dongmin. He was one of the children from the first ships. He had been 7 when they took him. Now he was over 800 years old, kept alive by council medical technology that extended life but not youth. He looked 70. He felt ancient. Dongmin told them things in whispered words. He told them about the early days, when the children still hoped for rescue. He told them about the experiments, the tests, the pain. He told them about children who died. He told them about children who broke and lost themselves. He told them about the rare few who survived and stayed sane. He told them about the others. The children who had children. Babies born in captivity, raised in these facilities. Children who had never seen Earth. Children who had been told that Earth was a story, that humanity had abandoned them, that the Council was their only family. There were thousands of them now. Maybe 50,000 across all 17 worlds. The soldiers wanted to take Dongmin with them. He refused. He said he had to stay. He led a hidden community of survivors. They kept each other alive. They kept the truth alive. They told the children born here about Earth. They whispered stories about a world with blue skies and green plants. They kept hope alive, even when it seemed pointless. If these survivors left, hope would die. The others would forget. So Dongmin stayed, and he made the soldiers promise to come back. Not just for him. For all of them. The soldiers returned to their ship. They brought data and recordings. The evidence went back to Earth. The world leaders saw it. The Eternal Vigil saw it. Everyone saw it. Now they knew the truth. The children had not just been taken. They had been tortured, used. Their children had been enslaved. And the Council thought this was acceptable. Nari continued her intelligence work. She hacked into Council communication networks. It took months, but she found classified files. She found the truth behind the truth. The Council had taken human children because of something they discovered. Humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. Most intelligent species developed slowly. They evolved over millions of years until they reached a stable form. Their minds were efficient but rigid. They could not change quickly. They could not adapt easily. They thought in patterns set by evolution. Humans were different. Human minds were chaotic. They formed new connections constantly. They adapted within a single lifetime. They could change their entire worldview based on new information. They felt emotions that drove them to impossible actions. They formed bonds that made them sacrifice themselves for others. They maintained hope in situations that any other species would accept as hopeless. The Council saw this as dangerous. A species that could adapt that fast could evolve past the Council. Or humans might inspire other species to change. The galactic order might collapse. So the council decided to study humans, to understand what made them this way, to find a way to control it or eliminate it. They took children because children's minds were still forming. They could study the adaptation process from the beginning. They could run experiments that would take decades and see results. They could modify developing brains and see what happened. The children were perfect test subjects. And if most of them died or broke, that was acceptable in the name of research and security. The files even had reports. Dry, scientific language describing torture as trials. Statistics about survival rates. Notes about interesting responses to trauma. The council researchers wrote about human children, the way human scientists might write about laboratory mice. Nari felt sick reading the files. But she copied everything. She made sure the evidence was complete. Then she sent it all back to Earth through the quantum link. The evidence changed everything. Now humanity knew not just what had been done, but why. The council had stolen children and destroyed lives because they were afraid. Afraid of what humanity might become. They had committed atrocities in the name of preventing a threat that existed only in their imagination. The human government decided to try one more time. They sent a diplomatic mission. Ambassador Suman led it. She was young, intelligent, and idealistic. She believed that showing the council their own crimes would make them understand. She believed in the power of truth and justice. Suman's ship approached the council's primary world under a flag of truce. They were allowed to land. Suman stood before the council assembly with representatives from all 15 member species. She presented the evidence. She showed them the facilities. She played recordings of survivors. She read from their own classified files. She demanded the return of all humans held in council custody. She demanded reparations. She demanded justice. The council listened in silence. When Suman finished, they deliberated for 3 days. Then they gave their answer. The humans in the facilities were not humans. They were council assets. They had been acquired illegally under the treaty. The research conducted was necessary for galactic security. The evidence presented was irrelevant because it showed nothing illegal under council law. The matter was closed, Suman argued. She appealed to morality. She appealed to basic rights. She showed them the second and third generation children who had never seen freedom. She begged them to show mercy. The council refused. They said galactic law superseded any individual rights. They said the treaty was binding. They said humanity had agreed to the terms and must accept the consequences. When Suman asked about the torture and deaths, the council called it acceptable losses in necessary research. When she asked about the children born in captivity, they called them products of council-managed breeding programs. They spoke about human beings like they were property, like they were things. Suman returned to Earth in defeat. She reported to the world leaders. The message was clear. The council would not return the humans willingly. They would not stop their experiments. They would not even acknowledge that they had done anything wrong. The galaxy's other species remained silent. Some because they agreed with the council. Some because they were afraid. Some because they simply did not care about humans. Humanity had tried peace. They had tried law. They had tried morality. None of it worked. The council was too powerful and too convinced of their own righteousness. There was only one option left. If humanity wanted their people back, they would have to take them back by force. Fleet Admiral Ariam stood before the cameras. Behind her, representatives from every human nation stood in unity. They had made a decision. She spoke slowly and clearly so everyone in the galaxy could understand. Humanity declared a state of total war. Not for conquest. Not for revenge. For rescue. Every ship would serve this purpose. Every weapon would aim toward this goal. Every human who could fight would join this effort. The Council had taken their children. Humanity would bring them home. No matter how long it took, no matter the cost, the galaxy watched this declaration with shock. Humanity was tiny compared to the Council. They controlled perhaps 30 star systems. The Council controlled thousands. Humanity had a few thousand warships. The Council had millions. It seemed like madness. But humanity had already spent 1,200 years on this mission. They were not going to stop now. The war began with the Ghost Fleet. These were ships designed by the best military minds humanity had. They were completely automated, controlled by advanced artificial intelligence. They needed no crew, no supplies, no rest. They could operate for decades without returning to base. They were not designed to win battles. They were designed to be a nightmare. The Ghost Fleet spread across Council space like a plague. They appeared without warning. They attacked supply convoys. They destroyed communication stations. They hit industrial facilities and disappeared before defense forces arrived. They used the phase drive to strike and vanish. No Council world was safe. No shipment was guaranteed to arrive. Fear spread through Council territory. For 200 years, the Ghost Fleet harassed the Council. They could not win the war, but they made sure the Council could never feel secure. Every Council citizen lived with the knowledge that a human attack might come at any moment. The psychological impact was devastating. But humanity was not just harassing. They were learning. Every battle provided data. Every engagement revealed Council tactics. Human ships recorded everything. Scientists studied the recordings. Engineers improved weapons. Tacticians developed new strategies. Slowly, the gap between human and Council technology shrank. The Council made mistakes. They were used to being the dominant power. They were used to others fearing them. They had fought wars before, but always against species that eventually surrendered. They did not understand an enemy that would never stop. They did not understand humanity's patience. They tried to negotiate. They offered treaties that would end the war if humans abandoned the rescue mission. Humanity refused every offer. Then the Council made their fatal mistake. They thought they could force humanity to negotiate. They thought they could break human will. So they made an example. They took 300 of the oldest surviving humans from the facilities. They put them on trial for inciting rebellion and illegal resistance activities. The trial was a show. The verdict was predetermined. All 300 were found guilty. The execution was public, broadcast across the galaxy. The Council expected humanity to be horrified into submission. Instead, they ignited pure rage. But more importantly, they made other species see the truth. 3 Council member species withdrew from the alliance within days. They said they could not support such brutality. They said the execution crossed a moral line. Within a month, 5 more species left the Council. Within a year, 12 of the 15 original members had abandoned the alliance. The Council fractured. Without the support of their allies, they lost territory. They lost resources. They lost legitimacy. The species that remained were the hardliners, the ones who believed in the Council's absolute right to do whatever they thought necessary. But they were weak now, vulnerable. Humanity saw the opening and struck. They launched simultaneous attacks on all 17 sanctuary worlds. Every ship humanity had built in 1,200 years participated. Every soldier they had trained. Every weapon they had developed. All at once, in a coordinated assault that took 5 years to plan. Captain Jinwoo led the assault on the primary facility. His fleet dropped out of phase drive directly above the planet. The Council defense forces were waiting. The battle was brutal. Ships exploded. Thousands died in the first hour. But human ships kept coming. For everyone destroyed, 2 more appeared. The fleet had been building for this day for centuries. The space battle lasted 3 days. Finally, Jinwu's forces broke through. Landing craft descended through the atmosphere while fighters provided cover. The ground assault began. It was not clean. It was not quick. The council guards fought hard. The facility was designed to be defended. But humanity fought harder. They went building by building, room by room. They extracted every human they could find. Some of the captives were too damaged to save. Some had been changed so much they were barely recognizable as human. But many survived. 40,000 humans from the primary facility alone. They were brought to the transport ships in a constant stream. Some walked. Some had to be carried. All of them were going home. The same scene played out on 16 other worlds. Not all assaults succeeded. 2 facilities were completely destroyed by the Council before humans could reach them. The captives inside died along with their prisons. But 15 facilities were captured. Over 40,000 humans were rescued across all locations. The battles did not end there. The Council forces retreated but did not surrender. They fortified their remaining territories. They prepared for a long war. But humanity did not pursue them. The goal was rescue, not destruction. With most of the facilities captured, the main mission was accomplished. Except for one. The last facility was different. It was located deep in what remained of Council core territory. It was the oldest, most heavily defended, and most important. Intelligence suggested it held the original leadership of the survivors. It held Minho and Sora, the children taken from Gina on that first day. The Council had kept them alive using life extension technology. They looked middle-aged, but had lived for over 1,700 years. They were symbols. The Council would not give them up easily. For 50 years, humanity tried to find a way to reach the final facility. Direct assault was impossible. The defenses were too strong. Siege would take decades. Infiltration had been tried and failed. Every approach had a problem. Until Commander Hana proposed her plan. Hana was a veteran of the facility assaults. She had seen the worst of what the Council had done. She had pulled survivors from cells. She had closed the eyes of those who did not make it. She knew what was at stake. Her plan was simple and terrible. A small strike team would phase drive directly into the facility's central power core. The arrival would cause massive disruption. In the chaos, they would fight their way to the detention blocks and extract the high-value prisoners. The team would probably not make it out alive. But the prisoners might. 50 soldiers volunteered. Hannah chose 20. They trained for a year. They memorized every detail of the facility layout. They practiced the assault until they could do it in their sleep. Then they said goodbye to their families and boarded the strike ship. The phase drive engagement was the most dangerous ever attempted. They were jumping into a shielded facility with active defenses. The calculations had to be perfect. One mistake, and they would materialize inside a wall or in the middle of a reactor. The jump happened. The universe twisted. The ship appeared inside the facility's power core chamber. The reaction was catastrophic. Explosions ripped through the section. Alarms screamed. Shields failed across the complex. Hana and her team moved fast. They fought through corridors filled with guards and automated defenses. They lost people. 8 soldiers died in the first 10 minutes. But they kept moving. They reached the detention blocks. They found the cells. And there, in a small room with walls covered in scratch marks counting the years, they found Minho. He was old, but not broken. He looked at the soldiers in human uniforms, and his eyes filled with tears. He asked if they were real. Hannah said yes. She said they were taking him home. Minho laughed and cried at the same time. He said he knew they would come. He had always known. Humanity never abandoned their own. Sora was in the next cell. She was weaker than her brother. The years had been harder on her, but she was alive. She was aware. When she saw the soldiers, she whispered one word: Earth. They told her yes. They were going to Earth. The extraction was a running battle. The team fought their way back through the facility, carrying prisoners who could barely walk. They lost more people. By the time they reached the extraction point, only 6 soldiers remained. But they had 12 prisoners, including Minho and Sora. The phase drive activated. The universe twisted. They were gone. The facility collapsed behind them. The power core destabilized completely. The entire complex was destroyed. Everyone left inside died, prisoners and guards alike. It was a terrible price. But Minho and Sora were free. The last of the original children had been rescued. After 1,800 years, they were going home. The transport ships approached Earth slowly. Inside were over 40,000 humans who had never seen their homeworld. Some had been born in the facilities. Some had lived so long in captivity, they barely remembered freedom. All of them stared at the screens showing a blue and green planet growing larger. Minho stood at a viewport with his sister Sora beside him. They held hands like they used to as children. Minho was crying. He'd thought about this moment for 1,800 years. In the darkest times, when hope seemed foolish, he had imagined seeing Earth again. Now it was real. The planet was there. Blue oceans and white clouds and green continents. Home. The ships landed at facilities, built specifically to receive the rescued humans. Medical teams were ready. Counselors stood by. But first came the families. Descendants of the original families waited behind barriers. They had been waiting for generations. Grandchildren of siblings. Distant relatives who shared blood but had never met. They came to welcome the lost ones home. Gina's descendant was a woman named Myre. She was in her 60s. A teacher who had grown up hearing stories about the aunt and uncle who were taken before her grandparents were born. When Minho and Sora came down the ramp, Myre was there with hundreds of others. She held a sign with their names. When Minho saw it, his legs almost gave out. Sora sobbed. They had family. After all this time, they had family waiting for them. The reunions happened across the world. Some were joyful. Some were heartbreaking. Some of the rescued were too damaged to understand what was happening. But all of them were home. All of them were safe. For the first time in 2,000 years, no humans were held captive by the Council. Earth celebrated. Every city held ceremonies. Every nation declared holidays. People danced in the streets. They cried and hugged strangers. The long nightmare was over. The children had come home. But the celebration was mixed with grief. 10,000 children had been taken. Less than half came back alive. The others died in facilities or were killed when buildings were destroyed. Their names were read aloud during the ceremonies. Their families mourned them. The galaxy watched all of this with mixed feelings. Some species celebrated with humanity. The ones who had left the Council sent messages of congratulations. They had opposed the atrocities from the beginning. But other species were nervous. Humanity had proven they were dangerous when motivated. They had fought a war across centuries. They had never given up. What would humanity do now? Would they seek revenge? The answer came 50 years after the rescues. Humanity established the Galactic Tribunal. It was held on a neutral world, broadcast to every species in the galaxy. The purpose was not revenge. It was justice. The captured council leaders were brought to trial. But they would not be judged by human law. They would be judged by their own laws. The very galactic codes they had claimed to uphold. The evidence was presented over 6 months. Every crime was documented. Every violation was explained. The Council's own files were used against them. Their own laws condemned them. Illegal experimentation on sapient beings, genocide, torture, enslavement, murder. The list went on and on. The Council leaders tried to defend themselves. They said it was necessary. They said it was legal under their interpretation. They said humans were too dangerous to be left alone. The judges were from neutral species. They listened to everything. They deliberated for a month. Then they gave their verdict. Guilty. Guilty on all charges. The crimes against humanity violated every principle of galactic law. The treaty had been a fraud. The experiments were atrocities. The Council leaders were criminals. The sentences were severe. Life imprisonment without the possibility of release. Their personal fortunes were seized and given to the survivors as compensation. Their names were recorded in galactic history as criminals. Their species were shamed. The once mighty Galactic Council was officially dissolved. Its member species scattered, trying to rebuild their reputations. But humanity did not stop there. The survivors, led by Minho and Sora, created the Remembrance Foundation. Its purpose was to ensure the atrocities were never forgotten. They built museums. They preserved records. They told the stories of those who did not survive. They made sure every child in the galaxy would learn what had happened when a group of beings decided another group was less important. Humanity also changed the galactic community. The war had shown that humans were powerful. The tribunal showed that humans valued justice over revenge. Other species began to see humanity differently, not as primitives or threats, but as a species that kept its promises. A species that protected its own. A species that could be trusted. New alliances formed. Species that had been oppressed by the Council reached out to humanity. Together, they created a new galactic organization. Not a council that ruled, but a community that cooperated. Every species had equal voice. Every species had rights that could not be taken away. The foundation was built on the principles humans had fought for. The right to exist. The right to freedom. The right to protect your own. Humanity also created the Eternal Watch. It was both military and diplomatic. Its purpose was to protect all sapient beings from exploitation. Human ships patrolled trade routes, stopping slavers and traffickers. Human diplomats worked to resolve conflicts before they became wars. The lessons learned over 2,000 years were used to help others. Humanity became the galaxy's protectors, not through conquest, but through choice. Minho lived to be over 2,000 years old, kept alive by the same council technology that had imprisoned him. He used that long life to work for peace. He spoke at universities across the galaxy. He met with leaders of species that had never heard of Earth. He told his story again and again. He made sure everyone knew what had happened and why it must never happen again. 2,000 years after the children were taken, a monument was built on Earth. It stood on the exact spot where the council ships had first landed. The monument was a black wall with 10,000 names carved into it. Next to each name was a designation. Survived and returned home. Died in captivity. Killed in facility destruction. Still missing. Presumed dead. At the dedication ceremony, Minho stood before billions of people and countless species watching across the galaxy. He was old now, even with life extension. His body was failing, but his mind was clear and his voice was strong. He spoke about the day he was taken. He spoke about the years in the facility. He spoke about the moment he saw human soldiers coming to rescue him. And then he spoke about what it all meant. He said the council had taken them to break them, to study what made humans human. They had learned something, but not what they expected. They learned that humanity's strength was not technology or weapons. It was memory. Humans never forgot. They learned that humanity would never abandon their own, no matter how long it took, no matter the cost. They learned that humanity never stopped hoping. Even when hope seemed foolish, humans held on to it. He said the 2,000-year struggle had changed humanity. It had united them. It had given them purpose, but it had also taught them responsibility. They had the power to protect others now. They had the knowledge to prevent such atrocities, and they had the duty to use that power and knowledge wisely. The galaxy was watching. The galaxy was learning from them. Humanity had to be worthy of that trust. Minho ended his speech with words that became humanity's motto. We are humanity. We remember. We endure. We rescue our own. Always. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then they erupted in cheers that could be heard from space. The noise continued for an hour. When it finally quieted, Minho placed his hand on the wall with the names. He found his mother's name, Gina, added to honor those who had searched. He found his own name, listed as survived. He found Sora's name beside his. He thought about all the years, all the pain, all the loss, but also all the determination, all the love, all the hope that had sustained them. The children had been taken, but they had been brought home. Humanity had kept its promise, and that promise would echo through the galaxy forever. The monument still stands. People visit it every day. They touch the names. They remember the stories. And they know that no matter what challenges come, humanity will face them the same way they faced the 2,000-year war. Together, with determination, with hope, with the absolute certainty that they will never abandon their own. Never forget. Never give up. The galaxy learned that lesson well. And the galaxy was better for it.